We're going to continue in our series, Domino 1, that we're in right now, and we're going to take a look at the story of a young girl named Esther. And if you have your Bible, open it up to there. It will not be on the screen today, so you definitely will need to look that up either on your phone or some of you brought your Bibles with you. But the story of Esther is a unique one in that Esther is a kid who drew a very bad hand, and there was so much going on in her life that we have sympathy for, that at times we even pity. She had a story that none of us would want to have. She lived a life in the beginning that none of us would want to live. She was from a different race of people. She was being raised up in a place that was her home, but it wasn't the home of her family tree, and so there were always going to be differences, and she was always going to be different than those around her. She was orphaned at an early age and then taken in by a family member, and she was raised there. Just so many things that we would not want to experience. And in so many ways, we would look at her life and feel bad for her and want to maybe even help out a little bit. But what we do know is that nothing was expected of her. No one would have expected anything of her. Even Esther didn't expect much of Esther. She would not have looked in the mirror and said, "You're going to be someone someday. You're going to be somebody." And there was none of that. There was just, here I am. I've got a bad deal. I've got a bad story, and I'll just see how long this lasts. So that's her story, and she's living in a place that may never really feel like home for her. And ironically, and I don't wake up on Sunday mornings and try to decide what it is I'm going to yak about up here for a few minutes. I have a little planning in that. But we're about to see the story of a Jewish girl who was taken into a place that we know now as Iran and forced to live there and live out her life. So we're there today, and Esther was one of the girls that was living in Iran as a Jewish girl. It had been a long time, and it wasn't as if she was taken from Israel specifically physically. Her ancestors were, and she happened to now, as offspring, as another generation, be raised up in a place that was never going to be hers. But it was where she lived. And the king of the country in which she lived, the city is Susa, it's now in southwest Iran, and the king of the country was very typical. He was disrespectful, he was rude, he was all those things. He took advantage of women. He did not value them much. He was usually drunk or full of food, either way. And there was just a lot going on where you would go, yeah, that's kind of what kings do. We get that. We look back thousands of years, and it seems like almost every time we find a king of a kingdom, this is kind of how it goes. And her kingdom experience was really no different. But as this particular king's story unfolded, he found himself in need of another queen. He had gotten rid of the previous queen. He needed another. And so the incredible plan that was put in place was that girls would be taken off the streets and brought into a beauty school for 12 months. And at the end of 12 months, they would be brought before the king for either a moment or a night, and you can let your imagination run wild there, but they're brought in, and then at the end of all the contestants being brought in front of the king, he would choose the next queen. It's as honorable as it sounds. So Esther is one of those kids that's taken in with no real attention paid to her backstory. No one gets, so she's a Jewish girl living in this place, and she's orphaned and and raised by her uncle, this man named Mordecai, and none of that was really on the table. It was just, hey, you with the eyes over there, come over here. You'll be a part of this. This is where you're going to be, whether you like it or not, for the next 12 months. And after a year was up, Esther was prepared, and she was brought before the king, and as soon as he saw her, he was in love. He had his breath just taken from him. That was it. The contest is over. Send everybody back. This is the one. And with that, Esther is given the crown, and she is now, at that time, the queen of this foreign place that she's trying to figure out. So this Jewish girl is now the queen of Iran, which is very, very strange. So she's there, in the palace, doing her own thing, seemingly very content, seemingly very thankful. I mean, anyone would be, to come from nothing and to now have everything, to be someone no one knew, to becoming the one that everyone wanted to be. I mean, it's an incredible story. And if this was a fairy tale and not history, the story would probably end right there. The end. Like, it's a great story, a rise to power, a rise from the ashes, a coming out of nowhere, a no one would have expected this from you kind of moment, and Esther is now the queen. I mean, what more could a girl want? Now, she just doesn't need to mess it up. The previous queen had messed it up because she chose to defy the king. So as long as Esther just doesn't mess things up, her life is set. Now, we looked at the life of Esther last May, 13 months ago. And if you want to go back and get a more detailed, I really went into the story. It's one of the most entertaining, even if it wasn't truth from God's word, which it is, but even if it wasn't, just alone, it's one of the most entertaining stories there is. And I encourage you to go back, either to go to the podcast and get to that message, or better yet, just read it in God's word yourself. God said it a lot better than I do, but you can go back and hit the message or that or both. So I'm not going to go into every detail here, but after Esther became queen, while she's just minding her own business, everything seemed to be working really well until one particular day she gets word that the man who raised her, this family member, her uncle named Mordecai, is grieving and mourning, and she's trying to figure out what's happened. And what happened along the way was that one of the king's men, who was hungry for fame himself, wanted everyone else to bow down to him as the king's official when he walked through town, and Esther's uncle refused to bow. Because although he's a foreign man living in this place, he's living in a place that doesn't recognize God as God, doesn't recognize the faith of his ancestors, but his way of continuing to be faithful was to not bow to any man, regardless of who the man was. So when the king's man goes by, everyone else bows down. Mordecai says, I don't bow for men. I bow for my God and my God alone. And it got under the skin of this official to the point where he goes to the king and said, King, we, meaning me, we have a problem. There is a group of foreigners who are from a different place, and they are going to be a problem. They may even revolt someday. The best thing that we can do is to get rid of them, so why don't you sign this paper? The king said, what's on the paper? Well, what's on the paper? We need to get rid of them. I mean, as in execute. We need to get rid of all these Jewish people in Iran. Let's get rid of all the ones in Susa. Let's wipe them out. We'll post it. They can take off running if they don't like it, but if they're here, they're going to be wiped out. And the king said, all right, sounds good to me. And an executive order, if you will, was put out there. Any Jew living within the capital city there would be wiped out on a particular day on the calendar. It was a specific day. So that word is out. Mordecai hears about this, and he begins to grieve, and he begins to mourn, and we hear the phrase, or read the phrase, sackcloth and ashes, like it was a visible mourning. Well, that word got back to the queen. And we don't know how much people knew as far as Mordecai's relationship with Esther, but enough where when Mordecai was crying and grieving and mourning, they told Esther, so somebody knew. So Esther then turned to one of her attendants and said, go find out what's going on with Mordecai. Why is he grieving, and why is he mourning this way? The attendant went and said, what's going on? Mordecai said, well, obviously it's because of the order. Have you not read this? Does the queen not know that her husband has signed this? We're all going to be wiped out. That's why. So go tell the queen she needs to do something. She's his wife. Go do something. Attendant goes back to Esther, says, you need to do something. She says, well, now you go back and you go tell Mordecai, go tell him I can't do anything. Legally, I can't even walk into my husband's bedroom without being executed. I have to be ordered and summoned in. Marriage of the year. I have to be asked to come in, and if I am not invited in by my husband, the king, I lose my life. And then everybody's dead. So what good is this? What do you want me to do? The attendant goes and he asks advice from Mordecai to give back to Esther. Now, I feel like most of us, if we're honest, would advise Esther, if we were near her in the palace and safe, we would say, just stay quiet. Listen, you didn't do anything to necessarily earn this spot anyway. You're just really pretty. That's why you're here. So just stay quiet. The last queen, it didn't work out so well for her. You need to stay quiet. Just do your job and enjoy this gift. Enjoy the fact that you now have something no one else thought was possible for you. Enjoy the fact that you are now in a place that you never thought you would be in before. Just enjoy it and stay quiet. It's hard for us to begin to imagine what it would be like to finally have the job, the role, the position, the opportunity of a lifetime. But then once you get it, find out that you're going to have to overlook some of your convictions and overlook some of your beliefs. Otherwise, you're going to risk it all. None of us is ever going to be in a position that Esther was in. We understand that. Our worlds don't work that way anymore, thankfully. We have other challenges, but we won't have that opportunity. But we all know what it is to face some really hard stuff and know what the easy way out is and know what the difficult road is. And Esther's right there. Because to Esther, this looked like the end of Cinderella's story. Like finally hitting midnight, I knew I can't believe I was here anyway. I didn't deserve to be here. If I step in, it's over. We've had a nice run. It's been good. I've enjoyed the crown. I enjoyed all the stuff, but this thing is over. But her uncle responds to her and gives her a different perspective. In Esther chapter 4, verse 14, he writes some familiar words and says, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows? But that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." He says, listen, if you remain silent, God's going to figure this out. God's going to do his thing. But who knows? Maybe this is why you're here. Maybe this is why God gave you those eyes that caught everyone's attention. Maybe that's why you're beautiful. And maybe that's why you've been given this opportunity. Maybe that's why God's put you here. It was for this very moment. It was his way of saying, I know, Esther, it looks like right now that this is the beginning of the end for you. I know it looks that way. But what if this is actually just the end of the beginning? What if it's all been leading up until this point and your life is not about to go down? Maybe this is where it begins. Maybe this is not where you die. Maybe this is where you find out why you're alive. And again, he didn't give promises. He said, maybe you're right, Esther. Maybe this is the end, but maybe it's not. Maybe this is where everything begins. And we've all trained ourselves to see the end of something coming. We know when it's coming. We know when the end of a song is coming. Even without lyrics, we just kind of listen to a song, think, we're kind of getting there. Some of you have never played an instrument before, but you know the song is about to end. You get a feel for that. You do this with television shows. I get mad when I do this, but I'll watch a show, a crime drama with my wife, or sitting there on the couch, and it looks like this might be the moment. And then I glance at the clock and realize we have 25 minutes. I'm like, oh, well, we're good. Like, plenty of time. They'll get out of this because it's not time. It'll at 9 o'clock, that's when it's going to end because a new show has to begin. You watch a movie, and this is the crazy part of a movie, and then you look down and realize, oh, we've just been in here 30 minutes. It'll be fine. He'll survive, or there'll be some sort of infinity stone. He'll come back. We'll be okay here. Like, it's not over yet. Because it's not time to be over. It's not the end. We know that. Dare I say, we know when sermons are about to end? You thought that you knew something. I know you know when I know I'm about to end. I know that. I can see it on your faces. And some of you lean over like he's landing the plane. Here it goes. Like like you feel it, you know, and I know. And sometimes I'm like, how could I trick them into thinking it's good? But there's a clock. You're like, the next service starts at 11. Like I know he's got to be done. Like it's coming soon. We know that. When a relationship is about to end, you know you're at a point where like, we're not going to be able to get beyond this. You know, you're a good old Tennessee boy and you found the love of your life and she's way above anything you ever thought you could have. And you're so blessed and you're so thankful. And you're like, this is the one. And you're just driving down the road one day to a restaurant to go out to eat, just stare at the love of your life and plan ahead. Something great happens and she just whispers under her breath, "Roll Tide." And then you're like, you know, we had a good run. Like it was really good. Man, she was so pretty too. Like but there's certain things you can't get beyond. Like, and we're done. We know when the end is coming. And sometimes we protect ourselves. Sometimes we just set it up because we're afraid of looking foolish. And there's no way that Esther is looking at this moment in any other way than, this is it. I'm like, this is the end. Because I know in my heart what is right. The one man who has truly loved me in my life is my uncle. And I know what he's asking, and I know he's probably right. This is the end for me. And yet, he responds to her and says, maybe not. And I think this story of Esther, this moment in history, is so important for us because most of us have gotten good at wishing away the hard parts of our lives. When life gets really hard, when life gets really difficult, we immediately try to wish it away, hope it away, pray it away, get through it, stay in denial, just move on. This can't be right. This can't be God's plan. This can't be a good thing. It hurts too much. There's too much pain, too much fear along the way. And although, yes, it hurts, and although, yes, it's hard, there is the option, instead of praying for deliverance, to pray for perseverance. There is the option, instead of quitting, to decide to start fighting. And to say, this may not be the end after all. Maybe I fight through this, but most of us wish it away. We quit, we walk away, we say, this is the end. We can't get beyond that. I can't go beyond that. I can't move beyond this moment here. And we stop. And it would have been so easy for Esther in this moment to say, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to ruin this. I'm just going to cover my ears, stay in my little palace room. It hurts me to think what might be happening on the outside, but I'm not going to wreck this moment. I'm not going to waste this opportunity. I'm not going to wish this away. But Mordecai saw something different. And before you and I wish away the hard parts of our lives, I want us to consider a few things that the wisdom of Mordecai seemed to indicate. He certainly wasn't thinking about all of these things I'm going to share, but the wisdom is the same. And the first is that God planned your part in his story. That's not profound, but it's important for us to be reminded that Esther didn't just appear and God said, oh, wow, I've got an opportunity here. I've got this cute gal that the king actually likes. I could do something here. God actually planned her part in this story. Mordecai was right. And God planned your part in his story. God planned that you would be where you are doing your thing. Not that we don't have freedom, but over and over and over through history, God has proven that regardless of what decisions we make, what mistakes we make along the way, that God works all things together for the good of those who love him. But he comes with a plan. And in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4, it says, the word of the Lord came to me, speaking about Jeremiah, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. That is powerful, very important truth. Before you were formed by me, by my hand and my will, in your mother's womb, I knew you, and I had a plan, and I set you apart. And each of us could look back into our family tree and discover some things. I know we all could. And we might even get to a point of thinking, I wasn't even supposed to be here. Like, I'm a bit of an accident. If this hadn't happened and this crazy thing, and if they hadn't done that really bad thing, and if that sin hadn't happened, and if that law hadn't been broken, and that, we could all do that and look at our lives like, well, I'm just this weird mix of whoops, there we are. And God says, no, it feels that way. The sin around us, the struggle around us, the death, destruction makes it feel that way. But before you were formed in your own mother's womb by me, I had a plan. And I have a plan for you, and I've placed you into my story. And Mordecai was trying to tell Esther, yeah, maybe this is the end, but maybe this is actually the thing. Maybe the hardest part is the most meaningful part. Maybe the struggle that you're going through now, maybe everything's led to this, and this is going to be that breakthrough. The second thing is that God planned your part in their story. Who's there? Well, those people who are around you, connected to you, relying on you, maybe even living with you. They're a part of your story. God has a way of overlapping all of our stories, and He planned it that way. He puts you in those places where you're connected and overlapping with other people. Paul wrote it this way in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our suffering, so also you share in our comfort. A lot of words used 2 or 3, 4 times there. I know it might seem like he was talking in circles, but there's so much there. He said, if we're distressed, if we're going through stuff, it's because ultimately the comfort that God gives us in this moment is going to be comfort that we can share with you. And there are things in my life that I've gone through that made no sense to me until later on when my life overlapped with people who went through similar things, and I'm able to reach out to them. And sometimes I look back and realize I went through a struggle or a trial relatively by myself. And God alone got me through that. And I don't want other people to feel that sense in which only God and God alone is with them. It was enough for me. It should be enough for them. But if our stories are going to overlap, perhaps God's placed me in their stories, and perhaps I've been distressed at moments so that I can help them. There are times when I've asked God to do something, and I've prayed for months, even years, for God to do it. 2 years after I prayed for it, God finally said, okay, here it is. And I look back at Him like, why did you wait so long? Like, why did you wait 2 years to do what you could have done then? Nothing is different. You could have easily done this then. You're as strong now as you were then. You're as strong then as you are now. Like, why wait? And then I look around at my life and realize then my life had not overlapped with other people. And then my story had not overlapped with other stories. And they worked together because God planned me. He wrote me into their story as well. You may not be appreciative of the fact that God wrote me into your story, but I'm in your story. And I'm thankful that many of you have been written into mine, because I would be much less without you. God's way of making me more and giving me more is by allowing my life to overlap with yours. And then the third is that God planned your part to serve the story. What I mean by that is the story is the thing, not my part in the story. It's easy for me when I look at, oh yeah, God's got a plan for me. Before He formed me in my mother's womb, He knew me. He placed me here. He even placed me in your life for this reason. It's easy to step back and begin to think, well, this whole story is pretty cool. This is my story. I mean, Esther got a book named after her. The book of Chad says, like, it's easy to do that and forget that my story serves the story. It's not the other way around. And Mordecai gave a hint of that when he said, if you don't stand up and do this, God's going to bring deliverance in another way. He was very much aware of the fact that God had promised, through Jeremiah actually, years earlier, before they were all taken away into captivity, that it was going to be bad. It was going to be bad for a while, but that God would reserve a remnant, a group of people, so that the people of Israel, the Jewish people, would always have a remnant, and they would always have hope. And Mordecai said, maybe this is your time. But if you don't step up and meet this challenge that God has clearly, in my eyes, put before you, God is going to do a thing. God does what he does. So God planned your part to serve the story. We don't have much time because got to land that plane. But in 1 Samuel chapter 15, there's a moment. God had given the people what they wanted, even though they really didn't need it, a king. He gave them King Saul. And then in 1 Samuel 15, verse 10, it says, the word of the Lord came to Samuel, who was a spiritual leader. And these are God's words. I regret that I have made Saul king because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. And then in verse 26, he says, you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel. God said, Saul, I gave you this chance. You blew it. Now I'm going to replace you with someone else with my own heart. And Mordecai said to Esther, listen, this is your moment. If you don't do it, someone else is. But who knows that this hardest part of your story may be the part of your story. You're not going to die. Maybe this is the moment while you're alive. Step into this. We have this series that I've called Domino 1 because of the way it affects everything else. And the decision I made years ago was that I was going to embrace the hard stuff because the hard stuff might be the most important stuff. And for me, that's been a domino in my life. Even to the point where my wife, who has greater faith than me, is stronger than me, who loves Jesus more than I will ever hope to love Jesus, and I feel like I love him pretty hard. But my wife is so in tune with what he's doing. There's still been times when she's asked me, like, aren't you worried about this? Aren't you afraid of this? Are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to take this step? But it's this decision I've made. Yeah, I am. I may be wrong. I may fall flat on my face, and this may be the end, or this may just be the beginning of something. And I'm going to trust in that and step into that because I don't ever want there to be a moment in which God leans over to an angel and says, I had this set aside for Chad, but he didn't trust me enough. I'm going to go get somebody else. I fear that moment more than anything in my life. And there may be moments when God just looks down and says, tell Chad to settle. Like, not everything is for him to jump. Like, I would rather find out on the other side that wasn't for me than to sit back and realize God had me prepared for something, and it was the hard thing, but I was afraid to trust him enough to do it. I'm going to close with this last thing from Esther. Go back to her. Esther chapter 4, verse 15. I love how she responded to Mordecai's advice. She said to Mordecai, or tell Mordecai these words, go gather together all the Jews who were in Susa and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law. And I love this. And if I die, I die. I'll do it. Let's get our hearts ready. I'm stepping in. This is either going to be the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, but I'm trusting him either way.